Hello and welcome to Cinemaholics, where we review the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. One of us is a film critic, one is a casual moviegoer, and the third person is me, your host, Jonah from the Internet California. And on the show today, we have from the Internet Pennsylvania, he's a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend, and he's, of course, our freelance film critic. He writes for The Playlist, Cutprint Film, and many more. Hello, Will Ashton.
Hey, I was going to say you have all these nice film-related things, but we're not really talking about film today, are we?
Oh, yeah, don't get ahead of me. Still have to introduce from the broadband basement. He is not only our casual moviegoer, he is our sound producer, and he is currently working his way to seeing Godfather for the first time. Okay. It's, of course, Maverick Hines.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, that's a nice little call to our Q&A episode, which is out now, by the way.
When I was beat up by Will Ashton for 20 minutes for not seeing the movie.
It's pretty brutal. Actually, we're going to get to that whole thing in a second. But first, here's just a quick overview of this week's episode. As Will alluded to, we are doing, I think, a Cinemaholics first. I don't think ever for the main show we have decided to review something more similar to a series. It's technically a limited series, but it's called Maniac, and it's on Netflix. It's directed by Cary Fukunaga, who's going to be directing the next James Bond film. And it's an interesting episode. We're going to be talking about a kind of a TV show, even though it is a miniseries technically. So that's going to be coming up. And later in the show, we have an interview that we did with Karey Kirkpatrick, the director of Smallfoot, and you're going to listen to that right before we do our Smallfoot review. So we are going to review Smallfoot as well. We're also going to be talking about The Hate U Give, kind of an early review of that, Hellfest, White Boy Rick, maybe a couple other surprises. I might discuss Night School, which I consider one of the worst movies of the entire year. We'll see if we have the time to get to that. Yeah, I think high and praise are two words for that movie. That said, let's get through our off topics real quick. We just have a few things to address. First of all, part of the reason we're talking about Maniac at all is because the patrons voted in our poll. So if you don't know, on Patreon, if you donate to Cinemaholics, we have a poll that we've been starting to do it more often, where our listeners who are patrons as well get to help us decide what films we review. So special thank you to all the patrons who voted on Maniac, and that was the reason we decided to go with Maniac instead of some of the other films that we're going to be alluding to in this episode. And if you want to vote in those polls, we have another one coming up for next week. You can help us decide if we're going to review Venom, Stars Born, or Hate U Give. And we might even do like a triple feature or something like that. So keep your eyes and ears out for that poll, and you'll be able to help us decide. That's just one of a few perks that we're rolling out on Patreon too. We're trying to do more exclusive content, like the Karey Kirkpatrick interview that I did, the director of Smallfoot. We released that early just for our patrons, I think our $5 patrons. So we're trying to do a little bit more effort to make those perks worth it. So in fact, that's a good segue actually into a new series that we're doing. It's called Happy Hour. And our first Happy Hour episode is coming out this week. I sat down with Alicia Grauso, who is she actually now is the editorial content writer for Atom Tickets.
Oh, it's official.
And yes, it's out there. We can now say it publicly.
Okay.
She's helping them. Atom Tickets is a wonderful service. I use it actually for my film going experiences. But yeah, I sat down with Alicia Grauso and we talked about the James Gunn controversy, the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and kind of our thoughts on forgiving celebrities. It's a really cool happy hour that is going to be coming out later this week. If you are a patron, you're going to be getting it a few days early. So thank you for being patrons of Cinemaholics. We want to do one special shout out to new patron DeWitt. He gave an extremely generous one-time donation. Thank you so much, DeWitt, for your donation. Thanks, totally man. Awesome. Sent you a special message.
Warms the heart.
Don't forget, we also have our Q&A episode out. It should be in your feed now. That was a fun episode. It's like 2 hours long. We answered all your questions. One of the big ones was what we consider overrated, underrated films. Will Ashton, did you get a chance to listen to this episode recently?
I started to listen to it. Unfortunately, I didn't get to finish it because I was having some issues, but with the audio. But from what I heard, it was a pretty fun, randy episode that we did.
That's right. I hope it wasn't audio with the episode, but it was more on your technology.
Yeah, it was more the I don't know what the word would be. The service I was using, I guess, was not cooperating with me at the time. So I'm hoping to check it out, the rest of it, as soon as possible.
It is a very funny episode, Maverick Hines. If you get a chance to listen to it,
I don't know if I want to relive it. I don't know.
There's a lot of trauma we put you through in that whole thing. Sam Noland as well. So, but that's out and that's out there. And thanks again to everyone who asked us the questions that made it to the final show. And just one last thing, don't forget we are now on YouTube. Just want to give that another plug since we just started our YouTube channel, still racking up the subscribers. If you want to listen to Cinemaholics in YouTube format, and if you want to check out some episode excerpts, just get things like that, like more bite-sized content, maybe some things from some audio from like old episodes, right? You can do that anytime. Just go to the show notes of this episode and you'll find a link to our YouTube. But okay, that'll do it. We've got to get to our featured review, and that is Maniac. Well, Ashton, I've talked a lot.
Okay.
Go ahead. Can you set the scene for us? What is Maniac? And I have a feeling a lot of our listeners, they're cinemaholics. Maybe they don't watch as many TV, and even if they do, why should they care about this new Netflix show? What is it?
Yeah, it's one of the more high-profile original series, I guess, from Netflix. Although I guess it's technically not really an original series because it's an adaptation, I believe, of a Norwegian show.
It's a remake. They're calling it a remake, but from my research, it's wildly different. Like,
really?
Yeah, insanely so. Like, maybe we'll talk about it in a second, but I almost hesitate to call it a remake or an adaptation. It's kind of inspired by it more than anything.
Well, what I meant to say was that it's one of the most expensive first seasons of television I think I've ever seen. Probably right up there with the first season of Game of Thrones because you got a lot of high profile talent here.
I think it rivals The Get Down, probably.
Yeah.
That was $10 million an episode.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the budget is, but yeah, we got Cary Fukunaga, or is his name now Cary Jojo or Juji?
It's Cary Joji Fukunaga.
There you go. Most people probably know him best for directing the first season of True Detective, which I think really kind of got the ball rolling on what we consider auteur television today. I mean, I know it was around before, but that's how we got Twin Peaks, The Return with David Lynch directing all 18 episodes. And there are a couple other examples. I guess, like you were saying, Baz Luhrmann doing The Get Down.
Yeah.
A lot of examples of that. And he was really the one that kind of proved that not that it wasn't proven before, but really demonstrated how cinematic television could be. And you can see that in here too. And in addition to his talents, we also have Emma Stone and Jonah Hill serving as our leads in addition to being executive producers on the show, kind of similar to how Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson were pretty heavily involved with the first season of True Detective. So
that's right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can really describe this series without diving too deep into spoilers, but we were debating, it's considered a dark comedy, but I don't know, that term seems pretty loose at best.
It might be deceptive almost. It might not really give people a proper impression.
It's a very surrealist, inner workings type of show. It's like Inception meets 2001 meets The Shining meets Black Mirror meets Legion meets that one episode of SpongeBob where it's everyone's dreams.
And that maybe covers 3 or 4 episodes.
Yeah.
I would actually say that there's more Charlie Kaufman in here than some of what you mentioned. I really got Synecdoche, New York vibes, a lot of Eternal Sunshine vibes.
I was, the whole time I watched it, I was like, I'm watching Synecdoche, New York.
Because you love that film.
It's one of my favorite movies. Synecdoche, New York and Eternal Sunshine are both some of my favorite movies. And I was like, yo.
Recently, Will Ashton, you referenced Anomalisa, what was, I think, your favorite movie
of 2015. And I would also say, the main hall is very Alien reminiscent, the main hall for Alien design that looks very similar. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of influences you can see in here, but at the same time, it is sort of its own thing in a little bit of ways, I guess, not counting the fact that it's a remake of sorts, of Loose One, as we were saying, but yeah, I kind of want to toss the ball back to you because I don't want to say too much more or else I'll be getting into spoilers.
Sure. I think we should say from the outset, if you're listening now, we're going to try to sell you on this show. Those of you listening who haven't checked this out yet, but I think the best way to do it is really to give it a shot. That said, though, I think that the first 3 episodes are a little rough. It steadily improves episode upon episode. And then once you get to episode 4, I think some people will probably debate this, between episodes 3 and 4 is really when the groove gets set and the show starts to become something that really felt important and interesting to me personally. So you mentioned Cary Fukunaga. directed this. And we should also mention Patrick Somerville kind of created the concept of the show, and he doesn't have a co-director credit, but he has a created by credit.
And developed by with Cary Fukunaga, right?
That's right. And so they developed a show together. And Patrick Somerville, I think most people are familiar with him through The Leftovers, which is a show I think Will, have you seen that one? Because I've never seen The Leftovers. I've heard it's amazing, and I've always wanted to get into it.
That's a show that's definitely high up on my I should watch this television list.
It's an unfortunate gap. You can tell that we're not a TV podcast.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've heard once you kind of get past like the first season, it gets really, really good in season 2 and season 3. Like amazingly good in season 3 from what I've heard.
That's definitely the consensus. I've heard that it has one of the most remarkable endings of any TV show, and it's a show that I feel terribly that I've slept on for the longest time. And I think Patrick Somerville, as far as minds go, I think that having Justin Theroux, in this show as well, we didn't mention, I think he's kind of the secret weapon of Maniac, in my opinion. So. We should also say Sonoya Mizuno from Ex Machina and Crazy Rich Asians is in this. Gabrielle Byrne and Sally Field has kind of an interesting role here.
Yeah.
And huge cast of extras and supporting characters. Now, we're going to give kind of a brief synopsis, and I'm going to hand it over to Maverick Hines because I don't know where you're at with this show. But the brief synopsis is, so we mentioned Emma Stone and Jonah Hill are in this. And, I should mention from the forefront, part of the reason I feel good about reviewing this is it does feel cinematic. We should mention Cary Fukunaga as someone who's directed a lot of films as well. As most recent, I think, is Beasts of No Nation, also with Netflix. I think to this day, that continues to be one of the best films Netflix has ever been a part of. You're going to say, Wash?
I was going to say, I mean, Sin Nombre is also one that he's very well respected for. I think that was his first film, if I'm not mistaken.
And then I think he did Jane Eyre as well. So he has a very wide range. And Cary Fukunaga, I kind of want to praise him quite a bit when we get into the nitty and gritty, because Maniac kind of showed me something about this filmmaker that has made me more excited for the James Bond film that he's going to do than I really was before. So we'll get to all of that. But yeah, again, the synopsis, we're really following the story of two main characters, Emma Stone and Jonah Hill, who are part of this pharmaceutical drug trial in this kind of alternate reality of our own. It's kind of like present day, but they're just noticeable quirks, and the technology sometimes is retro futuristic. So you can kind of think of it as like Blade Runner meets Fallout meets whatever, The Matrix, something like that.
Yeah, and a little 1984 for extra measure.
Yeah, it almost feels like 1984 kind of happened, and then this is like decades later.
Yeah,
and then if you watch the show, you really get the sense that it really belongs to Emma Stone and Jonah Hill. They're each of them are characters who've undergone incredible trauma, and then they sort of have their wires crossed. So to speak, and they sort of enter in almost like an anthology of short stories that with a narrative underplaying the whole thing. And it really is difficult to describe without giving away some of the best things about the show, which is the surprise of what you experience while watching it. And the last thing I'll say is I think that one of the things that this show does very well, actually, is the way that it steadily improves upon each episode, and it is highly rewatchable. I think that if you can actually go back and rewatch these episodes and really see a lot of the density of the details, and I think it's going to be a polarizing show for a lot of people, but I overall really liked this one. Okay, Maverick Hines, that said, I really still don't know what you think of this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I went to it super blind. You told me, hey, we're doing this, and I said, well, I guess I have to watch it now. Yeah. And that's as much information as I had before I clicked play on the show. So I had the benefit of going in not knowing much about it, and I'm glad I did. It's a super interesting show. Right now it's sitting at 81% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is higher than it was when I looked last. So I think more people are starting to watch it and kind of share their opinions on it. And I'm excited to hear where you guys are at with it. But it's a super unique, crazy experience. I found myself multiple times. I watched it with my wife, and I found it multiple times. We were like, what's happening right now? But like not in a way where we're like, oh wow, like how are they doing this? But just like, wow, like this is super, like I didn't see this coming. I didn't know this was going to be the next episode or the next sequence that we were going to see. And I appreciated that. Like I don't feel like in 10 episodes that I was ever truly bored. There were definitely times where it felt tedious for me, but not in a way where it was like, wow, I wish this wasn't happening. It's just like, man, this is a lot, right? Like this is dense. so I appreciated that I was always intrigued. I'm trying to stay vague so that way I don't unintentionally spoil, because I'm really good at doing that by accident. But one of my favorite parts about watching this show from start to finish, I watched the first 7 episodes in one day, and then I finished with the first 6, and then I finished with the last 4. And what was really fun about the first 6 is I stopped after kind of the first 2 kind of weird, crazy episodes. I think they're 3 and 4 or 4 and 5. And it was really fun to sit in those episodes as we're watching them and like notice like, oh wait, that's a callback from episode 1. That person was here, or this name means this, or like, oh, that's this person. Like there was so much there, so many little like fun clues. And I think that's what you were talking about, John, where it's like, it's super rewatchable, kind of the experience that you had with Searching, right? Where you watched it a second time, you were like, oh, that's what that means. That's what this is for. And I feel like this is going to have a pretty similar experience for me when I do rewatch it. And I do plan to. But it was super fun to just pick out all these little like callbacks and Easter eggs and stuff throughout these really, really dense like set pieces and experiences that these characters were going through. But I had a lot of fun with it, and I really enjoyed it.
That's cool. I think I had a much harder time binging the whole thing. I had to watch it a little bit more like one episode because it was so dense that I couldn't help. Like I kept pausing and then rewinding because I was like, what just happened? And like I really wanted to understand this world, and the world that they've created here, it almost is like a big fault of the show, is because sometimes these details ultimately don't matter. A lot of the questions raised don't really matter. And it is a great example of a show that goes very weird. And I think it's almost kind of saved by the fact that you do care enough about the characters, you graft onto them, so all the weird happening around them is pretty forgivable, and then you just end up appreciating the world building, as quirky as it is. Yeah. I will say, though, my biggest flaw with this thing, and one of the reasons I was very close to writing it off, and I still have trouble recommending it fully, is Jonah Hill. I think Jonah Hill was wildly miscast here. In certain episodes, he sings, but especially in the first episode, I think he is wildly off-putting and very hard to follow as a sympathetic character. It is interesting because his name it's like a reference right to the Milgram experiment. And it is sort of like they're trying it. They're doing this thing on purpose of this type of person who's kind of, not very sympathetic. And I just had such a hard time caring about him as a character. And I think a lot of that had to do with the performance. Wow. I think you see with him, he's normally a comedic actor. And I really tend to like Jonah Hill for the most part. I think roles like Wolf of Wall Street and Superbad, probably my two of my favorites from him. I've never loved him.
Not Brave Wilderness?
That's right. And Truth, I think that one of his other more like dramatic performances I really couldn't grab onto. I think this show is saved by Emma Stone and Julie Gardner, actually, and Justin Theroux and the rest of the supporting cast. I think they're all at their best. And conversely, I think Emma Stone, I'm thinking about it, this might be probably her best performance that I've seen from her, period. I'm struggling to put any of her other I would put this over La La Land, definitely The Help. I honestly think this is a standout from her.
Yeah, well, no, before you go on to Will here, I just have to say, normally I'm in pretty good agreement with you, and I do think Emma Stone was probably the best actor on screen for me at all times. I think she was fantastic, but I disagree with you wildly on Jonah Hill. I thought
that's interesting.
I loved his performance. I really, really liked it. And I think it's because of my expectations from him. It's like, he's a comedic actor. He's probably not going to be that great. So maybe I undersold it and hyped myself up a little bit. But I think at times he was absolutely fantastic. But I think you've expressed that you had kind of a different experience where you weren't really into it until like episode 3.
That's true, yeah.
I was sold from the beginning. I really liked it from the beginning, and maybe I'm just easier to please because I'm not a true cinemaholic yet. But I will say
Don't
that
sell yourself short.
I was incredibly impressed with his performance despite my expectations, and I thought he was compelling as this kind of like, nervous, it says in the synopsis, so I'll say it, like, he's got schizophrenia, he's weird, and like, I believed it, and I was invested from the beginning on that.
Okay, I want to turn it to Will, of course. Will, you've listened to a lot at this point. I really want to get your take for sure.
Yeah, I guess I'm somewhere in between you two as far as the points that have been brought up so far. So, I think I'm a little bit more on Maverick's side when it comes to binging. I end up watching, because of the time constraints as far as getting this episode out, I end up watching like 7 episodes today, basically in a row, and I think the show has actually benefited enormously by binging it, because you kind of get into its like groove very easily, and I think the way that the show transitions between episodes is really effective. Just kind of like how like in like your subconscious, you just kind of like swoop right into a dream, but it does it in a way that's gradual, but also kind of stark. It's very interesting in that regard.
I do agree with that. Yeah. Very true.
So I would actually recommend binging it. And I'm someone who hates binging in general. Like am generally against binging. Even shows I really like BoJack, I tend to try to watch them separately. But yeah, this one I actually would recommend binging. So I'm more on Maverick's side with that. I kind of agree with you on Jonah Hill, though. I'm a little mixed here because for like the first, I'd say 6, maybe 7 episodes, I was with you with Jonah Hill, where I was like, I felt his performance was like off. Like, it just didn't fit quite in compared to the other actors. Like you said, Emma Stone, I think is fantastic here. I cannot understand how anyone says that she's a bad actress. I think
they're completely wrong. She's one of the best actresses of her generation.
I feel like it happened around La La Land, ironically, when she won the Oscar. There was this like very negative attitude towards her where she, like, not only did people think she didn't deserve the Oscar for that, they were like, trying to criticize her as an actress, maybe for her singing, maybe not. And I think those criticisms are way off for her. I thought she was really good in that film. I think she's just a really good actress in general. And I think if you feel like she's not a good actress, just watch this show because she really proves herself in so many ways. But Jonah Hill, I don't know. I definitely in episode 1, I felt like it wasn't quite clicking for me. I didn't find him unpleasant or unsettling or whatever word you use to describe him.
I'd say unsettling as well, actually. I didn't say that word, but that definitely describes it.
But he needs to be a little off to begin with. It's the thing, because his performance is probably the hardest of the leads, I think. Like, even compared, like, Justin Theroux has done, like, a lot of weird stuff already. So, in comparison, this performance was rather tame for him. So, I feel like he's the one, Jonah Hill was the one that kind of had, like, the hardest, where you had to be restrained a lot, but also have to, like, you have to kind of sympathize with him, but also you have to be kind of put off by him. It's a very difficult balance. So I am a little sympathetic of that. However, I don't think his performance really did click for me until, he was like the mob gangster kind of guy. I can't say too much more. I agree with that. That's like when the performance
once
clicked.
That episode happens, I was much more, I actually started to appreciate the work he was doing, and it was starting to actually feel like it was kind of on level ground with Stone in some ways.
Yeah, so I'm not quite as critical, but I am a little critical of that performance. I think actually the episode after that, at first I thought I was not going to like that character, the one that comes right after that. Mm-hmm. But I think that scene is responsible for probably the funniest scene in the whole series. So I do end up ultimately liking that performance as well over top.
All I'll say is Doctor Strangelove. Anybody who's a fan of that film is really going to enjoy one of these episodes.
The Kubrick influences are not subtle in the least, I'd say.
None of the references are subtle, and I think that's probably go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm kind of a little more negative on the show, is that, I don't know, for some reason, I guess I thought it was going to be, like, weirder and more original than it actually was. And maybe that's just my expectations getting ahead of me, because I think it's safe to say that of the three of us, I was the one that was looking forward to this show the most, or at least I had the most expectations going in. Mm-hmm. And I felt like it was pretty straightforward, all things considered. I mean, maybe straightforward is not the right word, but I just didn't think it was quite as weird as I was anticipating it to be. And I found the references, especially, to be more distracting than not. I don't know, just all the Kubrick stuff, I guess you're supposed to be charmed by, and some of it is, like, it's very well done from a production standpoint, but I found it more distracting than anything. And I don't know if that's something that you guys felt or not, but that's something that kind of took me out of it a little bit, and I was disappointed to say that. But as it stands, I do like the show, but I might be the most negative of the three of us, I'm sorry to say.
I don't disagree with really the content of what you're saying. I think that's all very true. It is not quite as weird as I honestly was expecting. I think what drew me in here was the handling of the subject matter, which it's telling kind of a deep and personal story about how to handle, mental illness and really serious issues like that. I think that both of these characters, they have like really a platonic relationship, and not at no point does this show do sort of what I was kind of worried about, where it was going to be Milgram's just sort of pining over Emma Stone the whole time. Yeah. They really don't go that route, and I really appreciated that because it for me, it wasn't, the references weren't distracting. They just sort of informed everything that was honestly happening. And I think that the show's big message, its big idea, which I don't really want to give away because I don't think it's 100% there until episode 10. I do think they are successful in landing that, and the way that we deal with trauma, the way that we deal with pain, and what it has to say about just psychological issues, I thought was handled really well. It doesn't make a joke out of mental illness. It doesn't make a joke out of schizophrenia specifically. And it actually, I think it was very smart and clever in the way it used its references. But I do see what you're saying. It definitely isn't subtle. And I think that it can warp your expectations a bit. I can definitely see somebody watching this not really, basically seeing a setup and then a payoff that doesn't really work, that it doesn't really feel like honest to itself. So I definitely see validity in what you're saying. But for me, it eventually it got me there. And so I walked away from this one really enjoying it and recommending it to anybody who's curious.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I will say, I don't quite agree with you that each episode gets better. I actually thought the second episode was really good. And I think like the second episode more than the third one. I don't know. And then I actually kind of weaved into it. Like there's a couple episodes here I wasn't quite as impressed with as opposed to others. The fourth one though is pretty interesting. It's like a mini David O. Russell movie in the midst of all this, kind of loopiness.
Yeah. I do think though, I disagree. I honestly think I do really like the second episode, but I stand by what I said. I think that it does get better and better, and I think it's because they all build on each other. And it is hard to talk about because we normally talk about film and we wrap it all up together, I guess. And so I don't really want to pit episodes against each other. I guess it would be more fair for me to say that my interest in it was improving episode upon episode. I don't know about the objective quality, but for me, as it was going along, I was getting more and more invested. I was having an easier time watching 2 episodes instead of 1, because as I watched 1 episode, this is the kind of show that stopped me in my tracks, because I made such an effort to try to get this world, and you really can't, in a way that I think some people aren't going to be satisfied by the questions that it raises. And I tweeted this. I think that this is the show that I always wanted Westworld to be, where its mysteries and its convictions were a little bit more integrated in a way that I can watch it and actually care about what actually happens to these characters. So, we can lean into our final thoughts from there. I've said enough. I think that this one's really solid. I kind of grade it like a movie in this case, because it is a limited series. I give it a B+ and a pretty strong one. I think that it's definitely worth watching. Maverick Hines?
Yeah. I think everything you said about the how it handles mental illness is right on. I think it does a really good job. And I love the theme of, human connection too. We see a lot of loneliness and isolation and how people interact and meet each other. And there's just so much intricacy to this that I think is worth watching. And like I said before, I had a good time with it. And as a person who is a huge fan of Synecdoche, New York and Eternal Sunshine, I had a lot of fun with it just because of how much it reminded me of some of my favorite movies. So I'm right with you. It was B+ for me as well.
All right. Will Ashton close us out?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot here I do like, in addition to stuff we talked about, from the production design to performances. I also want to celebrate, I forget his name, I feel bad, but he's impressed me so much recently. He's from Ingrid Goes West. He plays the brother of Jonah Hill.
Billy Magnuson.
Yeah, I think he's really coming into his own as an actor, and Gabriel Byrne is really good in here as well. A couple other performances I don't know if we've talked about or not, but yeah,
we didn't mention Azumi very much. Sonoya Mizuno, who honestly is just wonderful. I think Mr. Justin Theroux was one of my favorite aspects of the whole thing.
She was great.
Yeah, she is really good, and I think everything that you were saying about how it portrays mental illness is sound, and I do think this is definitely a show. I think when you're pointing out Westworld, this is a comparison I did feel was pretty apt, in the sense that there's a lot of moments here where the show could have meandered, I guess, or could have gone way off, but it's actually, all things considered, a pretty tightly wound show, and I'm hoping they don't give it a second season, only because I'm pretty satisfied with how they ended it, and I think anything additional would just be unnecessary. And I guess there's this kind of temptation with TV now where, like, even like shows like Big Little Lies and I guess 13 Reasons Why, that were initially supposed to just be 1 season, they got pushed to 2, and we'll see how Big Little Lies turns out. And I think it's safe to say 13 Reasons Why didn't turn out too well when it got its second season. But
correct.
Yeah, so I'm hoping this doesn't get a second season, not because I dislike it, just because I think it's best as a standalone. But as it stands, while I didn't love it, I did really appreciate it, and I did like it quite a bit, and I am really looking forward to seeing what Cary Fukunaga does with the new Bond film, assuming he doesn't leave the project in 2 to 6 months, as I might be predicting he will be, but we'll see. I'm really excited to see what he does next, and I think this is a pretty good follow-up to his True Detective Season 1, as far as television is concerned. There is also a single shot that rivals that, the one that was found in True Detective, although
The car scene, but that's all.
No, I was thinking of the shootout. That's like kind of Atomic Blonde-esque.
Oh yeah, I guess. I think the way that they did there's a car crash scene. I think was also kind of like a camera in the car sort of thing. It wasn't a one take; it cut back and forth, but it was, I thought, much more impressive.
Well, I think the shootout that I'm talking about is actually like a wink, wink, nod to the True Detective thing. So that's why I compare the two. But as it stands, yeah, I do like the show, but I'm going to give it a B overall because I do think it doesn't quite fit perfectly, but what does work here really works. And I hope people check it out.
All right, a solid recommendation, I think, from all three of us. And I forgot to mention this. This is more about Cary Fukunaga. I think that what I really appreciate about this director that I don't think I had ever really fully appreciated before is he's such a pragmatist. And the way that, like, the fact that he did True Detective with these high profile stars, made them executive producers and really helped them own their characters. And the fact that he made that first season work, I think says a lot about why the second season didn't work because he wasn't as involved in that.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
And then when you look at this show, I think that like what he was able to do with the budget that he had, the way that he was able to like juggle two very high profile actors. And I would say, like, Justin Theroux is no small, feat to get on your TV show. I think the way that he handles actors and budgeting and working with studios, meeting the criteria that Netflix put in front of him, I think says a lot about he's not just a good, like, artistic filmmaker. I think that that's really important, obviously. But I also just think he's just really good at making films, like, around the realities of filmmaking that we don't usually talk about. So I kind of want to just give him some props that I think that, he doesn't get enough credit for being such a pragmatist and being able to juggle these really difficult projects. I can't even imagine, we didn't get into it much for certain reasons, but there are so many episodes in here that feel so distinctly different from the rest of each other. And it's no small feat to make that happen. So it just gave me like a little bit of even deeper appreciation of the entire thing. But okay. That is Maniac. All 10 episodes are streaming on Netflix. I think all three of us recommend it to the genuinely curious. And with that, we have our interview with Karey Kirkpatrick. He's the director of Smallfoot. I got to talk to him for about 10 minutes. We had a wonderful conversation. We talked about some of his favorite films. We talked about Smallfoot. And then after this interview, we'll get right into our review of Smallfoot itself.
Two Careys. That's really right.
So this is your third film as a director, correct? And your second in animation. I have that right?
That's right.
How has the experience for you changed over the years? Especially, it's been a while since you worked on Over the Hedge.
Yeah, where the tools are a lot better now.
I can imagine.
Yeah. I mean, every year, the advances in what computers can do are, certainly allow you to make a film that looks as good as this does, I think. The fundamentals of storytelling sort of never change, and even the basics of animation, all the people that I work with in animation are still chasing the masters, the Disney masters, precedents that were set in the 30s. So all of those key poses and really the pioneers of this art form, those are still studied today. So that doesn't change, but the world that you can create with the use of computers, there are some shots in this movie that I just think are just jaw-dropping, and especially if you know how difficult they are to create. I think movie-going audiences, not to insult them, but they all just kind of take it for granted, like, oh yeah, that's a Yeti standing in a snowstorm and his hair's blowing like crazy. It's like you have no idea the amount of math that is happening right now,
right?
To make that look like that. So, and I got to be honest, most of the time, neither do I, because there are loads of people who I just say, "Here's what I want it to look like," and then they go figure out how to do it, and they shield me from how complicated it is.
Right? They almost make it look easy.
They don't. Yeah, well, they don't want to disappoint me, and they don't want to come back and say, "We can't get you that." What they want to do for them is for me to go, "Oh wow, guys, that looks amazing."
Yeah.
Then that was a good week for them. So the fundamentals of storytelling are the same from story to story, and I've been doing this over. This will be my 30th year of working professionally. So it was, I guess, about 30 years ago that I started working on Rescuers Down Under.
Right.
And And the problems that you face in cracking a story never change. I haven't directed a movie since Imagine That, because I went off and then kind of did some other things in theater, and it was nice to be back telling people what to do. That's something that comes really naturally to me.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. You had a really great team on your side here, especially, I wanted to pay special attention to the voice cast. You managed to gather just an incredible voice cast by my estimation. How did you do it? How did you get so many high-profile people involved?
The real honest answer is we just asked.
Sounds easy.
And I mean, I guess, that's one of the perks of making a movie with a major studio that has a lot of relationships. And also we had some test footage of what the animation would look like. Mm-hmm. But I think this is, what's fun about this movie, you kind of know that you're onto something good when you tell people, hey, they say, what are you working on? I'm working on an animated movie called Smallfoot.
Right.
They go, oh, what's that about? Hey, it's Bigfoot in reverse. And they all go, oh, that's good. So without fail, everybody was like, oh, that's good. And especially people that I work with, where it's like, because they know that that's a good premise. It's a fun premise. It's a fun point of view switch. Fortunately, everyone that we pitched to had a similar reaction. A lot of times you have to catch people at the right time in their life. I mean, fortunately for me, my first meeting with Channing, I was a little bit like, okay, I have no idea what he's like. I don't know if he's going to be too cool for the room. I really didn't know. And he's such a good guy and so unaffected, by any celebrity or anything like that.
Oh, totally.
And the first words out of his mouth, dude, I have to say to you, I went and saw Over the Hedge before I had kids, and that's one of my favorite movies. And Hammy is one of my all-time favorite animated characters.
Oh, wow!
So I'm like, all right, well, this is going to be a good pitch, because he started with some, as a fan, as opposed to me going, well, I really love all the stuff you've done. So Zendaya really wanted to be a voice in an animated movie. James Corden, again, had seen my Broadway show and really liked it, and so he was predisposed to kind of want to be involved. Common, it was actually Zendaya's agent, and had the same agent as Common, and it was Common really wants to meet with you guys and be a part of this.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, yeah. Gina was the same. Gina Rodriguez is really great. LeBron, we approached his manager, and we met with his manager first, as his manager's name is Maverick, which I always thought, when you're LeBron James, that's what your manager has to be named.
And not to be Maverick. Confused with Maverick, a co-host of Cinemaholics. Not joking.
No. And Maverick was like, "Oh no, it was good for LeBron, because he really, really loves movies and wants to be involved, but he's limited with what he can do because of his basketball season. So doing an animated movie was a way for him to be involved with the movie, but not be so taxing on his schedule, like a live action shoot where you might have to go away for 30 days or even 3 weeks or whatever. So it was doable for him that we could catch him here and there. Yeah, and it's most actors really enjoy doing these because it's kind of playtime. It's like going back to original acting. It's just you in front of a microphone.
Yeah.
With me reading in, playing, really safe. You don't have to worry about how you look, makeup, wardrobe, all that. You can roll out of bed, come in, record. And I think they like being a part of something that, first of all, if they have kids, that their kids can go see, that's nice and clean, has a good message, that it's putting some positivity out into the world. They like being a part of that. And animated movies have a way of sort of living for a long time, especially kids who watch them. They make a really long-lasting impression.
The message is obviously, it's very poignant. It's very clear. Were there any specific events that inspired some of this writing and what you put into it? I know it's also based on Sergio Pablos' book, but how would you talk about the writing in that way?
Well, I do think we were, while we were writing it, it's impossible when you're a writer and a filmmaker not to pay attention to what's going on in the world around you. it was a world where we suddenly found ourselves, we're part of the national conversation. There was a lot of us and them conversations going on in the world, with kind of a migrant crisis and a tendency to kind of get fearful of what that might mean, and kind of create this us and them mentality, and to withdraw, into you a little bit, like just being a little bit fearful and uncertain, to withdraw into somewhat of an isolationist. That was certainly going on in the world, and where we realized, it's like, oh, I think this story that we're telling is a stronger allegory than we realized, pretending that we're this island on top of these clouds, and that was a lie perpetrated to keep the two worlds separate. In order to move past that, you kind of have to reach out. You got to communicate. You got to put a face with the group and realize that, to kind of generalize a group is really not the right thing to do. It's not, there's not going to be any progress in that. So not only does that have some sort of, work with what's going on in the world, but it also works with what's going on at my kids' school, of everybody sort of falling into groups. And I always laugh because my kids go to a school where the middle school and the upper school are on the same campus. But I hear them talking about, oh yeah, the middle school kids know not to sit at these tables at lunch, and it's sort of like there's an invisible line that the middle school kids know they're not supposed to cross with. And I'm like, this is so ridiculous. And in 3 months, that's going to be a high school kid, and it's like, why is there this, why is it our natural tendency to do this? This happens everywhere, is that we just find comfort in being in the groups that we feel safe with, and the ones that are different invokes this natural sort of fear, the sort of fight or flee tendency that we all tend to have. So, I like that the movie addresses that. There's a key line in the movie, which is, we think they're monsters and they think we are, and we're not going to solve that by hiding from each other.
Having seen the film, I totally see exactly what you're saying. It's present. It's right there in the movie. I think people are definitely going to see that when they go and check it out. So one last question for you. On Cinemaholics, we love to review films, not just as critics or anything, but also as fans. And some of us are storytellers like you. So as a storyteller who I can tell is passionate about films, are there any recent films from the last year, maybe last couple of years, that have really stuck out to you? Maybe they relate in some way and inform kind of what you've put together here with your team with Smallfoot.
Well, certainly we watch all the animated movies, and, I have nothing but admiration for the ones that, do it really well. I thought Coco was a really beautiful movie, as was Inside Out, really, and Zootopia. I mean, those three really stood out to me as being sort of, they really got me emotionally. Inside Out, that simple notion of how, with the pressure that we put on our kids to don't cry, don't be sad, that we kind of rob them of the full range of human emotion. And it's like, you can't be happy without experiencing sadness, and Zootopia and the way it so deftly dealt with prejudice, some similar themes that we're dealing with here. But I also, there was a movie that just came out recently, the one that sort of this year that has impacted me the most, I would say, is the movie Tully.
Love that film.
With Charlize Theron, because it made me really appreciate what my wife went through. We have 3 kids, and the unfair expectations that we place on mothers. That movie just really, really kind of did a number on me for that reason. And I thought it was just really cleverly done. So, I really like and appreciate movies that are about something that we can all take into our lives, that make us examine things. I don't think cinema necessarily needs to be used as a soapbox or pulpit necessarily. I mean, I think storytelling is such a useful tool to get us to think. I heard somebody talk about them as that movies are really empathy-inducing machines when they're done at their best.
Absolutely.
That a movie can go in, and if a movie can make you have empathy for something that you didn't quite have empathy before going into, then that's a pretty special experience.
All right, let's get into our mini reviews. So you just heard our Karey Kirkpatrick interview, so it would make sense that we now talk about Smallfoot. We each saw this. We've had some time since we saw this. We saw it, I think, like last weekend.
Yeah.
And it's a big wide release animated film from Warner Animation Group. It is about a kind of like I don't know if you should call him like a teenage Yeti, maybe like early 20s or something like that, but an abominable snowman, voiced by Channing Tatum.
They don't like to be called abominable.
I'm so sorry. They just like to be called snowmen. Not even men. They're Bigfoots, right? This is about a civilization of Yetis that secretly live in the Himalayas, and then one day they come in contact with the Smallfoot, us humans. And then hilarity ensues from there. So the film, like I said, not only was it directed by Karey Kirkpatrick, he's probably best known for Over the Hedge. I think that was his last animated film. He also did Chicken Run, and he did Imagine That and quite a few other projects. He also co-wrote the film, and it's based on the book Yeti Tracks by Sergio Pablos. The film is voiced by James Corden, Zendaya, Common, LeBron James, Gina Rodriguez, Danny DeVito, and as I mentioned before, Channing Tatum.
LeBron James.
That's right. Okay, so this is a heavy movie. Really, it's one for the kids, I guess. But well, Ashton, I mean, what did you walk away from Smallfoot with big expectations?
Well, let's just say this. I want to thank Karey Kirkpatrick for his time. I think he gave very thoughtful, considered answers. And I appreciate him joining us on the show, and I apologize. I'm going to basically, put down your movie. So, anyway, yeah, I wasn't really a fan of this film, and I actually had decent expectations going in because, it's a Warner's Animation Group project who, kind of came into the scene, I believe, around, 2014 with the Lego Movie, which I adore. I think the Lego Movie is one of the best animated movies of this decade, and I think that really got them got them running really smoothly. And I think they've produced, a steady stream of like at least decent films since then. I mean, that Storks is a good surprise. I enjoyed both Lego Movie spinoffs, even Lego Ninjago Movie, which kind of got criticized at the time, but I actually thought it was pretty fun for what it was. And I think there's something else, but I'm forgetting what it is at the moment. Was Teen Titans one of their productions as well?
I guess Teen Titans would be, but I don't know for sure because it's kind of DC. But
I know there's something else that I'm blanking on. But in any case, yeah, I mean, I had decent expectations, but as it stands, this movie is it's not even that bad. Like, the animation is gorgeous. I think the voice cast is generally pretty good. I think it has a pretty good message, one that's, fairly decently complicated for a family film, even though it's presented in a pretty straightforward fashion. But as it stands, the word that comes to mind is generic. It's just very like ho-hum. It exists. We did it. We saw it. And then you go home. And I'm glad we're not talking about it as a main review, mainly because I just don't really remember much about it. It happened and I just walked away with a shrug and didn't really think much of it, except for the whole Zendaya's Michi video. If it weren't for that, I think I would have forgot about it entirely. But yeah, as it stands, I just found myself kind of bored and disappointed by it on the whole, even though I did enjoy certain aspects of it.
All right. So I took a look, and before we go to Maverick Hines, so actually, Will, you covered it. All the Warner Animation Group films you listed. So there's Lego Movie, Storks, Lego Batman, Lego Ninjago, and now Smallfoot. But I will say they're upcoming films. We have the Lego Movie sequel, which is coming out in February. And they're also doing something called Billion Brick Race, which is supposed to be coming out sometime in
Jason
2019. And then we have a Scooby-Doo movie that they're doing. It's like, I think one of the first that they want to do of like Hanna-Barbera films.
That's the Dax Shepard one, right?
I don't know if Dax Shepard is in it.
He was attached to direct a Scooby-Doo movie.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope that we don't have multiple ones. They're also doing a Jetsons film, and I think they're also doing some work on the Space Jam reboot. They're supposed to be doing it. Yeah, I know. They're supposed to be doing the Cat in the Hat, which I think.
I was just about to bring that up.
Yeah. So how do you feel about that? And Speedy Gonzalez. Don't want to forget about that.
Really?
Yeah, they have a lot of films coming up. I think Lego Movie really set the pace for them to be sort of this like animation, kind of doing what Illumination and Blue Sky have been doing with like established properties.
I don't know if I'd do a Speedy Gonzalez movie in 2020, but okay. Each their own, I guess.
I think it's a little further down the road, actually.
Yeah,
2022.
okay. Yeah, no, I mean, with Cat in the Hat, I'm actually kind of looking forward to it because I do think if there's any one of these films that should just be animated, it's probably that one. Like, I think it lends itself much better to animation than it does as live action, as you can clearly see from the Mike Myers version.
We'll see how Illumination's Grinch turns out before.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. I think Illumination, I really don't want them to keep doing Dr. Seuss things because I think they're oversight. Like they just don't get it right, I feel like. And I think Warner Animation might be better at having the heart while not being so crass and cynical like these other adaptations have been. But in any case, let's talk back about that Smallfoot.
Yeah. Maverick Hines, what did you think?
That there Smallfoot. As a person who's gone through radical questioning of a church, I liked it. As a moviegoer, I was like, whatever about it. I don't know. I can't say much more without spoiling things, but
I don't think it really spoils. It's pretty blatantly like a
question
it's okay
your
to
church.
Question authority. Well, I don't think just the church. I think like institutions in general.
Yeah, I think it insinuates a little bit heavily towards the church aspect, but it's definitely just question everything. That was like the only thing I really remember about the movie. Will said it well. Like I honestly forgot we were reviewing it, and then you said, "Hey, we're doing Smallfoot next," and I said, "I saw that
movie. Is that?
I saw that movie. Are you sure?" I do remember my biggest complaint though when John and I talked about it afterwards. I was severely disappointed in the music in this movie. I think a movie like this, I don't know, I got my hopes up too much, right? I think I was going in hoping for like a How to Train Your Dragon experience, something cool, and something amazing, because I had just watched Moana and Coco, and I was like, I'm in this right now.
I mean, there was a lot of snow, so I think that's pretty cool.
You got me there, Will. But I would say, it was a pretty whatever movie. It was, I wasn't super invested the whole time. It was whatever. But the biggest thing that I had a problem with was just the music. I didn't think was very good. It's not like it was awful, unlistenable music, but like it didn't help the story. It wasn't super well written. The choruses didn't fit with the verses of the song. Like I'm getting a little critical when it comes to music.
Vibe, what you're saying, like the vibe of the music didn't even fit the movie itself. Like they felt very out of place.
Yeah, and even when it comes down to the mixing and like the transitions from verses to choruses, I was like, hey, this is like a big studio doing this. Like this is pretty second-rate music in my opinion for a show that's going to rely on music to do such pivotal transitional points in the story.
Yeah, I think like you remember when they did the Under Pressure like thing,
John,
which wasn't really the song Under Pressure. It was like James Corden doing like a weird rap thing to the sound and beat of. I don't think I've ever frowned so much during an animated film. I was so mad. Don't do that to David Bowie or Queen. Did you have something you want to say about the music, Will?
Oh yeah, I didn't know if it was just my screen or not, but I noticed that like the background music was a lot louder than the vocals for some reason. Yeah. Like, I was having trouble hearing the vocals.
It was not sound edited.
I told Maverick though that one exception, I do think there is a part where Common's character, the Stonekeeper, is sort of explaining, certain things to our main character. And I actually thought that sequence was the only musical sequence that I thought worked. And it was a part that I thought was kind of a bright spot of the film. It was kind of well choreographed. There was like a good rhythm to it. I think that it had some intensity and purpose.
And I think that has a lot more to do with Common than it does the show, right? Like Common knows how to tell a story through that style of presentation of music. So like, I think he carried that. And the fact that it wasn't like a verse, chorus song, I think also helped because they did not do well with that up until that point, right? But his kind of weird, it was a unique format for music in the show.
And obviously, like Zendaya knows how to sing. Like her musical number, it was definitely a great singing voice. I think that she's a wonderful performer.
Not critiquing her by any means.
It was really just the song itself, yeah.
Did you get the music video before the film?
No.
Oh, they played that scene before the movie. And then, like, that was really weird because, like, all the kids in my audience were like, we saw this scene already, mommy. And it just, like, underplayed this, like, supposedly
Why are these kids
supposed
calling
to be
you
huge
mommy, Will?
Not me, obviously. Jeez Louise.
Sorry, it was funny, and then I pictured it, and it got funnier. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
I even saw him do like the JD from Scrubs, like look up, like he's imagining it.
Oh no. I agree with you about the songs. I think it's just that I don't even think they were that bad. They're just super like kind of ho-hum to me, like everything else in the film. Although I will say, I thought Channing Tatum has a pretty good singing voice. I did not expect that.
His opening number was one of the probably a little bit better than the other ones, but Yeah, so that's Smallfoot. We're actually a little bit in the minority, I think. Like, I definitely wasn't very impressed, but Rotten Tomatoes has
69.
Yeah, it's like 69, 70% on Rotten Tomatoes.
It will.
Smallfoot, you know what that
We both
means.
tried to walk by it too.
Anyway, this kids movie.
I apologize. Yes.
I do think that most kids are going to like this. I do think that the animation looks pretty good.
Yeah.
I think the character design is pretty decent, and I think the message is accessible, and it's not a bad animated film for kids to watch. I just don't think it offers much for adults, really. But as a family movie, you could do way worse. I was a B- on this one. What about you, Maverick?
Oh yeah, we have to grade it.
I'm like a B-, but really close more to a C+, honestly.
I think I'm just kind of a solid B- on it.
D-?
B.
Okay. Oh, he said 69, so...
I didn't laugh at 69. I just said the number.
And then Will Ashton.
I'm going to give it a C. There just really wasn't... I mean, it's not really that I can be that critical of the film. It's just that there's not really that much to praise. So I can't get to B- level on it, unfortunately.
All right. Well, that is Smallfoot. It's kind of like a C+ average there. So take your family. You might enjoy it. Next up, we have The Hate You Give. Now, we might be talking about this in more detail next week, but, there's some big high-profile releases. We have Venom, Star is Born. Will Ashton, you had a chance to see The Hate You Give this week. I had to miss my screening, unfortunately, but I have read the book by Angie Thomas. I love the book. It's a YA about Black Lives Matter, and it's a very wonderful original story about a young girl. And Will Ashton, tell us about this movie. What did you think? And are you looking forward to talking? We'll definitely want to talk about it more next week. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to talk about it with you when you see it, because I read the book as well, and I found it very powerful for many of the reasons I'm sure you did. It's really, I think, going to be one of those seminal books that's going to probably be read in high schools for generations to come. And I think it's really going to impact a new generation and speak to this one very much. And it's certainly understandable why they made the film of it. And I think I'll talk about it more next week, but as it stands, I think it's a very solid adaptation of the book. It streamlines a lot of the main stories. There's a lot of stuff in the book that was kind of loosely connected that they tie together a lot closer. At the same time, though, I think the movie focuses understandably more on Star's story as opposed to the community itself, which was something I found really impactful about the book, and something I was kind of disappointed that was not featured in the film quite as prominently. So, should I talk more about what the film's about, or should I just let the viewers go in cold? Because I guess it's kind of better to go in not knowing what the plot is, but at the same time,
I think a little bit of both. Yeah, you don't have to give away probably the big moment that I think you're thinking of. But yeah, at least give some of the listeners like a basic impression of what kind of film they're in for.
It's a response to national event or national news stories like Trayvon Martin's story and several others that have really just shook this country, and I think have really riled people up in a way that is going to make this movie very impactful and very relevant. And I will say, I think what really, really works here is the lead performance from Amanda Steinberg, is I believe her name, right?
That's right. Mandela Sternberg.
There you go. And apparently she has a strong social media following. I did not know that, but
she was Rue in the Hunger Games.
Right. She's Rue. She was in Everything. Mm-hmm. And she was in The Darkest Mind, I believe, earlier this year, which I didn't see, and it kind of flew under the radar. But she's getting kind of typecast into these young adult adaptations. But I think this is, pardon the pun, a real star-making turn here. And I feel bad for saying that just because of the pun, but
yeah.
I know it's really cheesy, but it's sincere. I do think this performance is truly exceptional. The way that she juggles a lot of the bubbling, complicated emotions that are in Star's character and just her mind during this thing, that it's a very introspective character in the book. She communicates that so well and so authentically throughout this performance that I really think it's her performance that makes this movie shine as bright as it does. And I think there's a lot to value here, and I want to talk about that more when you see the film and when the listeners get a chance to see it, because like I said, I don't want to give away too much about the plot, but as it stands, I think it's a very well-weaved movie. I think it talks about a lot of stuff that's very relevant in a way that's emotionally honest and sincere, and I think it's going to really be an impactful moving experience for a lot of people, and so I hope people check it out. I'm going to give it a B. I'm still kind of working out some of my feelings because, like I said, there's a couple things I think that are left out from the book that I would have liked to have seen here that I think would have made the movie even stronger. But as it stands, it's a really solid adaptation, and I think it's going to inspire a lot of people to not only check out the book, but, feel, emotionally charged and ready for what's about to come nationally and politically, I'd say.
All right. Well, that's the hate you give. I know there's been some controversy about Amanda Sternberg's casting.
Oh, really?
Well, just in the fact that she's technically like a lighter skinned black actress, okay. And there was some outcry about that, and like it is interesting that you mentioned her star making performance, and I know some people were kind of questioning like why do these casting decisions? There is a bit of a pattern of casting black actresses who are not dark skinned. The show Dear White People kind of addresses this a bit. So I think it's worth bringing up. It doesn't sound like it tampered your experience with the film. And I think we can agree Amanda Sternberg is a fantastic actress.
Yeah, I thought she really gave a great performance. So yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted to say first and foremost. So, and I actually thought you were going to talk about the controversy around KJ Apa. Is that his name? Apa? Is that his last name? The guy from Riverdale that plays Chris.
I don't know about any controversy with that.
Oh,
Riverdale's a fantastic show.
From that YouTuber guy who got fired, like, after they shot the film.
He got a what, did you say?
He got fired. Like, he got cut from the film because they found, like, some, like, comments that he made on, like, a YouTube video that they went. You didn't hear about that?
I did not hear about this.
Oh, wow. So, yeah.
The Riverdale fandom has been kind of silent, so that's very disconcerting.
No, but he filled in for this guy. That guy got fired, so he...
Oh, yeah, then no wonder.
Yeah, so he like, kind of came in, I think, last minute and like reshot. Like I'd have to assume it's like 25% of the film. So gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to talk about that more. Talk about his performance because I have a couple criticisms as far as he's only 21, but he looks like way older than a high schooler should be. As like it
agree to disagree, Will Ashton, but
I don't know. I haven't watched Riverdale, but I mean, he looked distractingly older than the rest of the high schoolers in the movie, in my opinion.
Well, it looks like so you like the film. I think most critics are liking it so far. Out of there's only 20 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's at a strong 95%, with critics liking it for the most part. So should be a pretty solid film to go check out. With that, let's move on to Hellfest. So I just saw this one yesterday. And wow, it was definitely something. I kind of went into this. It was directed by Gregory Plotkin, who I'm honestly not very familiar with. It was also written by Seth Sherwood. Again, not really familiar with some of these writers, including Blair Butler and Akilah Cooper. And a story by William Pennick, Christopher Say, and Steven Susko. I think Steven Susko is probably the most prominent of those individuals. He's a screenwriter, producer. I think he's best known probably for the Grudge films. And I think he directed Unfriended Dark Web, and that was his first film. I think we only briefly mentioned Unfriended Dark Web earlier this year. That said, Hellfest is a slasher film that takes place it's like a traveling amusement park where it's really like the horror nights that you can see at like different places, like in Universal Studios and Disney, and where you and your friends can go and you can like walk through like these mazes with like, actors kind of dressed up and they try to scare you. And the premise of Hellfest is that a group of friends go into one, but there is actually a real life serial killer who is killing people. And when he kills them, he makes their bodies like part of the background. So nobody even notices the deaths. It's kind of a fun premise. Say again?
Pretty clever. I mean, it's a fun horror premise.
It is. Now I've heard that there are other films like it that are a little bit more like
Bloodfest.
Yeah. Even in the name of the title too. That said, I kind of walked away from this one being like, this feels like a B movie for B movies almost. I give it points for atmosphere. I think they go all out with making this amusement park feel real and kind of terrifying in the place that you want to go to and visit. Some of the mazes are really funny and inspired. You really get the feeling that this was made just to have some production design that is creepy and horror filled. But as a slasher film, I was really disappointed because you have this opportunity to go all out, to make it weird, to go into territory that slasher films usually can't because they are refined by certain rules. Like, why doesn't everyone call the cops and things like that? And they found the most boring ways to put certain characters in dire situations. And I was so disappointed in this film. I really was disappointed in it because of the potential and because I really was in the mood for kind of a spooky, gory, crazy, balls out horror flick. And what I got was something that honestly could, if you just have to like edit some of the gore and you would have had like a TV movie, honestly. So I was very disappointed by that. I think none of these characters are worth following. There was so much lack of care for them. I couldn't even root for the guy to kill him because that's how much I didn't care about them. So I was heavily disappointed in this. But at the same time, Hellfest, it is one of those like bad movies that you can have a good time watching. You won't be that bored, and some of the kill scenes are actually kind of fun and interesting. There's one in particular that like I wasn't sure if they were actually going to show us the death itself because of the tools used and everything like that. And I was like, oh, cool. They actually, they actually went there. So that was cool. But then it doesn't match up with some of the other deaths being way less memorable. So it was a little off and not very even there. But overall, I mean, look, if you want to just rent a horror film you've never seen before and you're kind of interested in the premise, you and your friends might have a good time. You just may want to get a little inebriated, assuming you're of age, and enjoy it in that way. I definitely don't heavily recommend this one. It's just kind of annoyingly average. I think that's the word for it, because like it's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but man, it could have been so much better. I gave it a C, pretty close to a C minus though. It really was disappointing. All right. So then next we have White Boy Rick, which, Will, you've already talked about before. You were kind of, remind me, what was you were like a C plus, B minus on that one, maybe?
B minus, yeah. I gave it a B minus. I was actually, I think it was a high B minus, because I do think it's an enjoyable, entertaining film. However, I just think the story is kind of messy in its approach, and I think it would have been better served as like a 10-episode miniseries and like American Crime Story S season. I think that would have been a much better approach. But I'm curious to hear how you guys felt about this film.
Well, yeah, Maverick and I saw it this week. I'm going to copy and paste Will's review. It's basically where I'm at. I don't have much to say, but Maverick Hines, I want to hear where you're at with this.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't have a ton to add either, unfortunately. I think Will said it pretty well. There's not a lot to this to, praise. I think I can't remember his name, the main actor who plays Rick, I think he did a pretty decent job with the character. What I didn't like about this was I did a bunch of reading afterwards. I like to read, when it's movies like this where they're telling the story. I like to read the story afterwards. And to me, after reading kind of some of the true facts about the story after watching this movie, it kind of felt the same way I felt when I was done watching How to Make a Murderer on Netflix, where it's like, oh, this show was clearly trying to get me to only believe one side of the story.
Right, because Making a Murderer leaves out a lot of details.
Yeah. So they this movie leaves out the detail that apparently the real Rick set up a crime ring in prison and wasn't necessarily the perfect inmate and stuff like that. And I thought that was kind of shady because they make this whole story pending around him being a victim, which I think obviously in some ways he is, but there's aspects to it that you have to, I think, need to be included in a movie like this, right? If you're going to tell a story, tell the whole story. So yeah, I'm other than that, I'm pretty right in line with you guys on that. I was also going to give it a B minus when I came into this review. It's whatever. It's another one where I was like, yeah, I saw that. And
yeah.
That happened, and I don't remember a ton about it. And yeah,
you really covered it. And I think the reason we still checked it out anyway is because I was interested in the true story of it.
Well, this was one of my fall movie preview excited ones. So I thought it was going to be cool. I like stories like this where it's telling something that really happened in a dramatic way, and just didn't get there for me.
I'm a sucker for Matthew McConaughey. I'll even see his mediocre films, and I think Belle Powley, I'm always excited to see what she's up to, and I was a little bit surprised by her performance here. There was more to it than I thought the trailer was alluding to. I thought that she was going to be a blip, but she actually has kind of a role here that's interesting, more interesting than I anticipated in a good way. But that's White Boy Rick. Yeah, I'm more of like a C plus, kind of close to a B minus. I don't really know yet. Yeah, not that great, but if you're interested in the true story of it, you might want to go check it out. It's still in theaters. Real quick, I saw Fahrenheit 11/9. That's the new Michael Moore documentary. I won't spend much time on this one. It's a documentary. It's political. It's it's not really about Trump, which I think some of the trailers have given off this impression where it's like very politically like Trump is terrible and all this stuff. It really is more about like a couple of isolated stories involving like real Americans. There's a whole segment about the Flint water crisis. There's a whole segment about the Parkland students. And then there's a couple other things here and there that are kind of unrelated. But it is a documentary that starts off with like kind of relitigating the 2016 election. Talking about why Donald Trump won, why it was such a big surprise. A lot of people didn't expect it to happen. This is, of course, Michael Moore. He's a very progressive, Bernie supporter. So we're bringing all this up because it's a very political movie. You already know if you want to see this. I don't think it's the kind of film that's going to convert anyone politically, but I do think if you are politically left, it does its job in the same way like a right-leaning documentary is going to really like energize somebody on the right. It does that same thing for people on the left. And there was a lot of illuminating stuff in here. And I didn't have too much to criticize, but I do think that it was pretty down the line, pretty average in terms of the documentary style of it. Definitely not up to some of Michael Moore's more interesting work that he's done earlier in his career. But sorry, Will Ashton, I was on a tear. We were going to say.
No, I just was going to say, I mean, to his credit, I think he was, as far as I saw, one of the first people who really, like, as far as on the left side, was like, look, this is very likely, it's very likely that Trump is going to win. Like, I know there's like all these polls and stuff, but I've been talking to people in like middle America. He had like this big blog post about it. And I remember he was like one of the first like progressive people who was like, you guys are really underestimating this. So that was one reason I was kind of curious to check out the film, although I just don't really know what he has to say that hasn't already been said. Like, it's kind of the same deal that,
have you seen it yet?
I've been meaning to, and unfortunately haven't gotten the chance, but, I am curious to check it out. Do you have to see, I mean, I saw Fahrenheit 9/11 a while ago. Is this like a sequel to that, or just the title itself is similar?
It's just the title itself. It's okay. Not all that related. 9/11 was more about the Iraq War. Right. Honestly, Will, I think that the new thing this movie is saying that hasn't really been said before is that he kind of takes Democrats to task. Okay. And he criticizes Barack Obama on very specific things. And he criticizes just power in general. And like he criticizes Hillary Clinton. And it is sort of like, I guess it's not new, but it is a documentary that is pretty fairly critical of the ruling class, no matter what like party it is. And on that, I do respect him for that. I think that he is being, you do get the sense that he's a critical observer. He's obviously very biased. And if you don't believe in his biases already, you're going to be very frustrated watching this movie. There's just no way around it. But if you're somebody who, has always been like, the Democrats are amazing, they never do anything wrong, he's here to be like, no, like our politics are really messed up. And he goes into specific reasons why, and it's worth checking out, even if you don't agree with it 100%. But it's not taking the box office by storm. It's one of his worst performing documentaries. It just really, really sad. And in general, documentaries, especially this year, haven't been all that successful. I think Won't You Be My Neighbor was an exception.
And Three Identical Strangers did pretty well, I believe.
It did okay, yeah. But I think the money that Fahrenheit 11/9 is doing is nowhere near, I think, what people were kind of expecting. And so it's being looked at as a bit of a failure right now. But that's Fahrenheit 11/9. And I think we just have one or two things left here. We're running very low on time. But Will, you just watched the 13th season of Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I had no idea this show was even still on.
Yeah, I mean, I should say, I've seen the first 4 episodes. That's all has aired so far of Always Sunny. But I really wanted to talk about this because I do consider Always Sunny to be generally one of the best long-running sitcoms on television, especially today even. I know that's a high bar to reach today as far as comedy is concerned, but just the way that the show, especially now, like in season 13, continues to reinvent and innovate itself in so many interesting, compelling ways and challenge itself and really play with structure and challenge and just question who these characters are, cause there is definitely this sense that it is, I think, the modern day successor to Seinfeld in the sense that it kind of takes the similar ideas of Seinfeld, like these 4 very narcissistic plotting, people and like this friend group that when pushed to this extreme is like way more toxic and a lot of bad other things you can say about them, but there's this weird like lovable quality to them that's kind of hard to put your finger on. But I will say this season's interesting because when it started out, there was a big question of, is the show going to go on without one central character? I can't give away too much, but there is a prominent character who the season before, season 12, left, and he went on to do a different show on NBC. So it was a big question of, is he gone for good? Like, is the show going to be the same without him? And I don't want to give away too much, but the show definitely has an answer to that, and it involves Mindy Kaling in the first episode, who plays a really fun role in the premiere. And I think that episode is definitely one that shows how good the show can get about challenging or continuing to reinvent itself even under challenging circumstances. And then in this previous episode, the episode before the one I'm going to talk about next that came out this week, they do kind of a spin on the like female reboots. So they have an episode where I forget the baseball player's name, but there's an episode from an earlier season where the gang like all try to beat this beer drinking record on a plane, where they have to like drink like 100 something beers in the plane ride, and they do that with the waitress, Dee, and then two other characters who I'm forgetting off the top of my head. And it's a pretty the way it's written, especially it's critical but also fair and fairly sympathetic to this kind of trend of female reboots, as we saw with like Ghostbusters and Ocean's 8, for instance. And there's also this episode that came out this week, which is, I think, the one that's maybe going to earn the most controversy, which is Time's Up for the Gang, where they really kind of talk about modern political things, as it were, when challenging the group as far as their misdeeds in the past, and really kind of putting them to task for what they've done, and just what these characters are and how we can still follow them, and also somewhat making light of the situation, but at the same time never in a way that's I guess gross or misconceiving in that way. But I do think this show is so good for what it is, and I do think it's a shame that you guys aren't quite as consistently watching it as I am, because I think it is really, really just a good, innovative sitcom that takes a fairly simple premise and continues to change and reinvent itself in so many interesting, compelling ways. And I should also note that especially the last two episodes I was talking about, and I think most of the episodes, at least so far, have been written and directed by women, which is pretty good. I mean, I think that definitely helps a lot as far as tackling the subject matters that they are talking about this season. So I would say the show is just as good as ever, and I'm very happy to say that.
All right. That's It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, season 13, first 4 episodes. And like Will said, yeah, I've seen like maybe a dozen episodes or so since it came out in 2005. I've never been the biggest fan, but I've loved every episode I've seen. I've just, for whatever reason, never gotten around to sitting down and binging all the episodes. And I think there's like 10 or 11 episodes a season, basically, maybe 12. So one of these days I'll get to it.
Yeah, I mean, I can say it's definitely kind of, if you're not in the right mindset, the show, I mean, following these very terrible people for more than one episode can be a bit challenging, but I do think the show is very smart about how it handles its characters and the misdeeds they do. So I would definitely recommend rewatching or watching more of it.
All right. Last we have Night School. I don't have much to say, except this is one of my least favorite films of the year. So bad. This is the new Kevin Hart film with Tiffany Haddish, and part of the reason I watched this was because I was really just in the mood for just a basic studio comedy, nothing special, nothing crazy, but I love Tiffany Haddish. I think she's very funny. I like Taron Killam, and Kevin Hart, he can be funny when it happens. I think even in some of the films he's been in that haven't been all that great, I think he just has a pretty natural charisma. He's got a great presence. This movie, I think what really bugged me about it, it's about a guy who goes to night school because he dropped out of high school and he's trying to impress his fiance. And then his night school teacher is played by Tiffany Haddish and puts him through the ringer, basically. And the premise is fine. I think that it's an interesting premise. This comes from Kevin Hart's, his like filmmaking company, production company that he made.
Yeah, he co-wrote it.
Yeah, he co-wrote it, he produced it, but it's directed by Malcolm D. Lee. And it's such bad filmmaking, and I think that's what really grinds my gears on it a little bit more than I was anticipating, honestly, because I don't have much to say except this was just bad filmmaking, terribly shot scenes, character arcs that make no sense, just very sloppy technical errors. To me, it's like they didn't put the effort in. I think some of the performers did. I do think that some of the rest of the cast, they're doing their jobs. They're they're all good actors. I think Rob Riggle is doing his best in here. I think Romany Malco is cool, and Keith David, they're fine. Nobody, there's not an actor in here that isn't giving it, pretty close to their best at least. But the writing is so terrible. This thing has like 7 screenwriters, like 6 or 7. And it feels like sloppy, put together at the last minute. Characters say things that don't make any sense. Characters say things that are the audio is like spliced in, and you can tell it's not really what they're saying.
Yeah, you talked
There's so
about
many
that.
goofs. There's so many errors that should have been caught in post-production. And I guess that part of why, and I also think the message is really weird. It says things about dyslexia. At one point, it just does not handle these topics as well as you might imagine. I just don't think it's useful. And the worst part, it's not funny. I didn't laugh once. I should have laughed. I mean, this is Kevin Hart and Tiffany Haddish, two of the strongest comedic performers in Hollywood, and this film had nothing. And I don't think it was getting chuckles from anyone in the theater, and I was very disappointed by it. And we talk about it all the time. Comedy is subjective. I'm sure someone's going to watch this and absolutely adore it because it's going to tickle them in just the right way. But for me, if I can't even rely on them getting the filmmaking right, it fails on that, then this one's really not worth checking out. It's a D for me.
Whoa!
Yeah, I don't think I've given a D yet this year. I just really... Why are we doing this?
Sorry, we'll get the ball rolling. I just felt the freedom. I felt the freedom to laugh.
Keep going. But yeah, that's Night School. It's not any good. It's obviously it's not an F movie, I guess, because there's nothing about it that's so
John, if you had to rewatch this movie or that last Transformers movie, which one would you watch?
I would probably watch Transformers because I would at least laugh.
That's you got a good point.
All right, that's it for our mini reviews. Time to close our show with a preview of what we're going to be talking about next week. We have 3 films. We've already talked about The Hate U Give from 20th Century Fox. That's the YA Black Lives Matter film. We also have A Star is Born, which is a new wide release from Warner Brothers. This is the Bradley Cooper. He both directed and stars in it with Lady Gaga. It's getting crazy reviews. People are loving this film. It's almost a shoo-in.
America!
At the Oscars. We're far from The Shallow now, Maverick. And last, we have Venom. Venom is the new wide release from Sony. It's like a superhero / anti-hero / villain film from Ruben Fleischer, best known for Zombieland, Gangster Squad in 30 Minutes or Less. And this is the one, it's like a Spider-Man movie, but one of his most famous villains, Venom, played by Tom Hardy. Now, we have these 3 films, very different. They're all very different, and they all kind of cater to different audiences. Venom is more for teenage boys. It's PG-13. Star is Born is a little bit more for, cinema
America.
Well, I think A Star is Born is really covering everybody. It's really a wide appeal.
That's why I said America, John. It's for everybody.
You know what? Other countries too, Maverickians.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm sorry. I'm closed-minded.
Other people from other countries listen to our show. So.
I just don't think anyone listens, so I guess I'm closed-minded.
Right? Yeah, I can tell by the things you choose to say. And then The Hate U Give. The Hate U Give is more of the YA, the more of basically the people who think Venom looks stupid, but are the same age. So we are going to need, as always, these days at least, we're going to need your help deciding on which film we want to feature review. We do have an idea of doing a triple feature where we talk about all 3 films and then maybe not do any mini reviews next week. That's an option we've been tossing around. We're going to be putting out a poll on that on our Patreon. So if you're listening and you're a supporter, you can help us decide. If we decide to do all 3 films, you can help us figure out what's the order. Do we want to start with Venom? Should we start with Star is Born? Let us know. And thanks as always to everybody who helps us with those decisions. If you want to become a patron on Patreon, you can do that anytime, and then you can be part of that and help us out. But with that, let's finish things out. If you love our show, don't forget to leave us a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. I just saw we got a new one this week. Thank you so much for that. You can hang out with us on our social pages. We're on Facebook and Twitter and everything. You can find links to everything right in the show notes. You can also find our email, cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. Send us any feedback, questions, anything you want.
Every time you leave a rating, John gives me a meal in the broadband basement, so I'm really counting on it.
You're getting really thin. It's yeah. But yeah, that'll do it for us this week. Thank you so much for listening. From the Internet California, I'm John Negroni.
For the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
From the starving basement, I'm Maverick Hines.
See you next time.